All right, folks. Good afternoon. I hate to be the guy to break up a conversation. Good to see some familiar faces. My name is Jarrod Barnes. I have had the chance to work with an incredible team to help lead PLDG, which is the Protocol Labs Developer Guild. I don't know about all of you, but Bangkok has been putting my stress levels to the test with travel in between venues. So I'm like coming down from frantically sprinting off the train, but very excited actually to tell you a little bit about PLDG, but more importantly, actually have a bit of an open discussion on how to best grow open source ecosystems as well. And so part of this will be a bit of a hybrid discussion, maybe 10 or so minutes of framing, just giving you backdrop and context on PLDG, who we are, what we do, what we are looking to accomplish, and then actually would love to hear some of your thoughts as well and some questions for discussion. So maybe just to kick us off here, what is PLDG? We are birthed actually by Juan Benet and really focused on accelerating open source ecosystems by growing the number of contributors that are actively working on open source software. We do that through structured cohort-based programs. We recruit globally all over the world, from recent grads to college students to folks that are mid-career professionals and transitioning, to help them find opportunities in open source, predominantly within the PLN network, with Filecoin, IPFS, DRAND, libp2p, to name a few of the partners that we work with, but put folks through a 12-week program that is solely focused on helping them find opportunities in open source and working with technology partners to help them not only increase engineering velocity, but solve real problems that they are looking to solve on their roadmap and open issues that they have. We started back in April. Earlier this year, so relatively new program. And as we have been growing and scaling, we started in cohort 0, which was really just a, call it beta, to get the program off the ground. I actually was a participant in cohort 0. We are now in cohort 1. And so I had the opportunity to join the team. And as we are continuing subsequent cohorts, really excited to be building things out. A couple core things. You see this flywheel here. We really focus again on attracting folks that are excited to contribute to open source. So a lot of times that looks like, as I mentioned, recent grads, college students, folks in career, in transitions. We then focus on enabling them to find different opportunities with our technology partners and meaningfully drive outcomes, which I'll talk a little bit about here as well. So just to give you some high-level context, we spend a lot of time measuring our impact. I'm going to do a demo here in a moment and actually walk you through our impact dashboard that tracks all of the issues, PRs, and development activity that our cohort is doing. So I'll walk you through that here in a little bit. This is something we spend a lot of time on. I bring it up, but really also just want to highlight some of the success stories that we've had in a relatively short amount of time. We've been able to do some awesome work with partners, one being libp2p. I don't know if Dave is here today. I saw him yesterday, but we've had now 13 of our cohort members be able to meaningfully spend time with the libp2p folks. We spend a lot of time with Phil Oz and Phil B. Actually shipping the Phil frame, which Phil B team is going to be sharing a little bit more about. But I share this in that, you know, we obviously have a mission and vision for creating impact in open source, but these contributors are shipping. These contributors are very serious about closing open issues and actually meaningfully accelerating engineering velocity, which is exciting to see. And so why we bring this up is, you know, there is obviously the mission-oriented aspect of what we do, but at the end of the day, we want to be able to reward folks for the impact that they create. And so we have a retro PGF mechanism that is really focused on 2 phases. The first phase is solely onboarding and getting folks to find their first issue as fast as possible, right? And really be able to get plugged into the ecosystem. And so we have pretty structured onboarding, pretty structured education and learning in that first few weeks of the program. Then the second half of the program, we work with our technology partners to actually measure that impact and say, hey, how is this specific cohort member doing as part of the program? And that is what we benchmark our rewards off of. So as you can see here, This is very like high level back of the napkin math, but the base impact, if you just close one issue, right, you can earn a relatively small amount. But actually, if you are highly engaged, you can earn up to essentially 2,000 USD per month as a contributor. And let's say you're a recent grad or college student, that actually can go a really long way, right? And so we want to show that there is value in participating in open source and reward those folks based off the impact they create. So I bring that up because this is where we're at today, right? And being able to go from cohort 0 to cohort 1. As we actually think about scaling and growing this program, we thought about two sides of the equation. The first is the demand side, right? Anything in open source, it's driven by contributors, right? It's driven by humans who are actually building this technology. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about what is the best way we can onboard and get folks excited about becoming a contributor, right? And so much of that is through programming, and so much of that is helping folks, and no different if you were to join a community, it's like finding your first friend. In open source, it's finding your first issue. That's kind of your first friend in the world of open source. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we help folks close that gap of what we refer to as time to first commit. That's kind of our atomic unit of measurement in time to first commit, and make sure the incentives are clear. Now, on the demand side, we want to continue to work with amazing technology partners, right? We've worked with kind of the historical PLN network, which is incredibly powerful, and been able to build a solid kind of bedrock to grow off of. But we're constantly thinking about how do we continue to expand that pie of folks that we work with. And so in order to make this mutually beneficial for technology partners, we say, how can we help you quantify all of the open issues that you have? How can we work with you to take your roadmap and optimize that for somebody who may know absolutely nothing about your technology to contribute to that? And that's where we really sit as PLDG, is that gap in the middle of technology partners and open source communities that are looking for more contributors, helping them close that gap, and contributors who are looking for opportunity. And so that's where we're really at today, and kind of a core piece of our strategy is we're finding out both sides of that coin. How do we continue to really double down? So I share that as like framing to some of the open questions and feedback we'd love to curate. But I share that we're shaping this vision actively. But some of the core pillars that we're really building around from a metric standpoint, I mentioned that time to first commit is really, really a big deal. Right now, we're at about 2.5 weeks for cohort members to finding that first issue and actually closing a first issue. I think in the context of our first cohort, that's great, but we actually want to get that down to less than 6 days for somebody joining the program, understanding the PLN network, and meaningfully contributing to an open issue. For us, that's a great atomic unit of measure to say, wow, we've really kind of cracked this nut on onboarding. So that's kind of the first piece. The second piece is we've intentionally put our cohorts back to back to be able to retain people and keep momentum through the program, right? One of the hardest things about open source is it's pretty ambiguous. And so if we can keep the structure going and that retention from program to program, we firmly believe we can continue to meaningfully produce outcomes for technology partners. And then the last two are more actually on our kind of recruiting and then actually being able to work with partners. We want to continue to grow the number of contributors. Today, we have 45 contributors who are part of our program, who are actively engaged, meaning they are closing at least one issue per week, which is amazing. And we also want to make sure that the mentor to contributor ratio is equitable and even as well, meaning that we don't just want to have 1,000 contributors and they're not actually able to interact with anyone who's on the other side. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about working with partners to ensure that we have those mentors in place as well. So still ironing out the vision, but these are some of the bedrock metrics that we're really backing our way into to know that, hey, we might be onto something here and really finding our footing. As well. And so this is actually what I wanted to get to and kind of pause here in more open discussion, given some of the knowledge in the room, right? Two things that we are really spending a lot of time thinking about. The first is accelerating that time to first commit, as I mentioned. So much of that is structured onboarding and programming, but also really understanding in broader open source, what's actually the bottleneck to someone getting started? right? I think what we found is part of it might be you might not know a programming language, right? Say I'm new to Filecoin and I'm just now getting my hands on Lotus and I've never written anything in Go, and this is very overwhelming. So I'm going to be probably a little bit slower there. That's something we think a lot about. The other thing is, open source. I may be working a full-time job and I don't have a ton of time to, dedicate to this. And so we think a lot about how do we close that gap. And so we'll be interested to hear perspectives and thoughts there. And then on the other side of the spectrum, right, we also think about how do we continue our momentum and get folks beyond just that first commit, right? So much of it is, hey, you get your foot in the door, you get that first commit. Now, how do we actually compound that and get you to be maybe even a maintainer, right, as well, which we started to see signs of over the past few months, which is really exciting. But also curious from more of a broader open source perspective, what is the secret sauce that actually gets people to stay? Right, as well. And a lot of that is community, a lot of that is relationships and actually being able to put faces to names, but very curious to hear a little bit more thoughts on that. So those are our two kind of discussions would love to hear more on. I'm gonna give you like 30 seconds to think about that and those two questions, and I'll do a demo of our dashboard as well to give you guys some context. So put those thoughts in the back of your mind, and then I'm gonna pull up our dashboard, do a quick demo, and we'll have some discussion. This is our PLDG dashboard. So what is this dashboard? What are we looking at here, and why did we build this? Well, one of the challenges of running a program of this nature is you're actually doing a lot of analysis, right? You're tracking about 50 folks globally and their contributions to open source software. And so how do we actually close that gap and quantify some of that impact and really start to say, are we onto something? Are we off? Like what is actually going on here? So this is a combination of Claude 3.5 Sonnet and our team of putting this dashboard together and being able to quickly track what's happening and really look at both engagement and contributions. So this is simply just using the GitHub API and tracking individual repos and an Airtable dashboard that we use to collect week over week. So you're seeing some metrics here. As you can see, don't get alarmed by our week over week performance. It's because we reset this every week and we capture information on Mondays. So it's giving the most recent engagement. But what we really look at is our engagement. Who is highly engaged? Who may only be working on a few issues or so? And who is it that we actually really need to reach out to and be proactive with and engage a little bit further? And then we track all of the open issues through our project board, right? We look at who are the folks that are working on new issues week over week? What are some that are in progress and which have been completed, right? So this gives us a really just quick pulse check and visual to see a little bit of progress there, right, as well. And then something we spend a lot of time thinking about is who are the partners that we're not only working with, but what are the contributions that they are getting to their ecosystem, right, as well. So the Phil Oz Lib P2P team have been definitely popular amongst our contributor network. And I think there are some obvious correlations there, but we do spend a lot of time thinking about how do we make this as distributed as possible so folks are getting as much value as they can. And then lastly, we do spend a lot of time just with our contributors as people. And we say, like, who is really doing a great job? Manu has been absolutely just engaged and killing it over the past couple weeks, and is one of our top contributors to the program. And so this is something that for us can just give us a quick dashboard view of a pulse check, right, as well. So I share that this is very early innings of just us trying to quantify some of the impact that we see, but also share this as a open source public good. So there is visibility in saying, like, there are things going on here. People are actually closing real issues, writing code, and contributing in a meaningful way. So we're going to keep iterating, keep building off of this. But if you have any questions, happy to share a code base or anything with you on it. But wanted to do a quick demo there. So that's really all I had. Would love to actually turn it over and go back to some of our discussion questions here. There we go. Okay, go back to our discussion questions and hear any thoughts. I know there's a lot of folks who are contributors here who may be technology partners, and just better understanding what might your bottlenecks actually be for onboarding folks to your ecosystems. Or on the other side, if you've had folks that have really become meaningful contributors, what has made them stay? Or what are some things that you've asked yourself that would be helpful in getting more folks just retained and sticky in your ecosystem. So curious if there's any thoughts, and if not, that's okay too. But would love to hear any thoughts or perspectives there.
Yeah, I can kick it off. So yeah, thanks, Jarrod, for sharing. Also, for context, to people, I do participate in PLDG, so I work with contributors. One way to onboard new people that I think will be useful is that I know we qualify, like we look at submissions and we think about people who have good developer experience, but not necessarily always in the certain technologies. Like we are looking for people to skill up. I think it might be useful, and then sometimes people that come in super fresh to like Filecoin, IPFS, P2P, they have a ton of questions. They're like, where do I get started? And by then it's already the start of the program. And so maybe that's why it takes longer for them to commit, maybe if they're super new. So maybe if there was like you get accepted from the user contributor perspective, you get accepted, you have like 2 weeks to onboard yourself. Here's a 101, here are all the resources, a cheat sheet maybe, and then when they come in, maybe they are like ready to start straight away and we start measuring it from then. So then maybe it will reduce it to like 6 days for a first commit. Yeah.
So you're more saying like spending a little bit more time on education initially, whether that's like a drip campaign or just being a bit more hands-on in like the early innings. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, kind of like you have some time to orientate yourself before the timer starts and we actually start the program, and then, yeah.
It's a really, really great point. Yeah, other perspectives?
I had a question about, have you thought about how to deal with problems like Goodhart's law? Like when you're trying to define these metrics to track how candidates are working, like that those metrics don't get derailed and followed for the purpose of the metric rather than the outcomes you're trying to create beyond them?
It's a great question. If I'm just hearing you correctly, I'll repeat it back of like over engineering or over optimizing just for the metric itself versus the impact. Oh, sorry. Thank you. I don't know what happened there. Anyways, if I'm hearing you correctly, yeah. No, it makes total sense, right? I think the metrics are directional. And it's a bit more to understand the pulse and understand at a really high level, are we trending in the right direction, right? Just turn it back on. Yeah, sorry. Gotcha. I didn't plug it into the charger. Thank you. Metrics are a bit more directional. So if I go back to what you're sharing, yeah, like some of these core metrics, it's a quantitative way to measure qualitative behavior, right? So less than 6 days the time to first commit is really a quantitative way to better understand not only quality of onboarding, but where the psychology of our participants and cohort members are really at, right, in terms of their velocity. And same with retention, right? It's a bit more of like a directional number that lets us know that there is some persistence there, right? We're driving a sticky experience versus just trying to optimize for the number. And then I think I'm also picking up what you're saying, perhaps on like number of issues closed or number of PRs and things of that nature. I think it really goes back to, there might be one issue that actually is immensely impactful versus 10 that are not as impactful. And I think that's where it's working like more closely with the technology partners to understand kind of the influence on the roadmap, right, as well. And that's a really great point. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the thing I was getting at with that is just to check that you guys were thinking about it, because I think to overlook the person who submits 1 or 2 changes that are like groundbreaking versus the guy who's cracking out 14 tiny changes that are README updates or whatever the equivalent they are. Like it'd suck that the person that did the groundbreaking work didn't get like kudos.
No, it's a great point. And this is where we work really closely with our partners, both in the early innings and throughout the program. Early innings to actually define what is the meaningful work that you would want done, right, over the next quarter, over the next 12 months. So then we can kind of reverse engineer to that, and then having consistent touch points with mentors to actually get that pulse of, hey, this contributor, what is the impact that they're creating? So we have essentially, in a very informal way, an impact rating that each mentor submits on a monthly basis that informs our distribution as well.
Cool.
Any other thoughts, questions, anything? Yeah.
Hello. We just started using PLDG, and my experience was like in person. So I assume all this goes online or through like whatever means you connect. So I really enjoyed the in-person experience of getting the people to know, get them to work with us, and getting them to code together and hack away on everything what's going on. So I don't know if there's kind of a focus on getting more in-person done, or is it always going to be like an online experience on how that works, or is there going to be more attending the hacker houses that are maybe going to happen in the future or something like that?
It's a great question, and certainly an open one. I think it's so hard to replace pair programming and just in-person time together. I think there is an inherent value in having a presence at kind of the conference circuit. To date, we've been fully distributed, fully online, and I think the upside to that is inclusivity from a global cohort. To date, it's been fully distributed. And there's upsides to that, downsides to that. I think we've been trying to find a healthy balance in the middle, and very, certainly could take this offline, but hearing what might the key inflection points be that would actually, be a lever to growth. Because I think over-indexing on either side could be dangerous. And so trying to identify what would be the biggest lever if we were to, plant a flag in person biannually, annually, in some way, shape, or form, I think could be really interesting. And I know something we're very open to talking about. So appreciate you raising that.
I almost see it as kind of a little bit of if people want to get engaged with companies and want to eventually maybe transition into like a full-time job or anything, working on that after the weeks that they worked in this program, then the in-person experience is almost like a job fair, right? If it's like a bigger event, a lot of people would be there that are regional or something like that, would definitely help me from a perspective of hiring people or getting to know them. Or it's the best experience in person, right? Everybody knows that it works remote, so that's.
And I do have 5 minutes here, so I'm actually going to ask a question back to you. And curious, as a technology partner, what is most important to you? Is it technical expertise? Is it actually more of the soft skills and just ability and desire to learn? Let's say there's a new contributor that is interested in your technology. What actually would be most important to you in working with a contributor?
So my decision mostly is driven by how the person interacts with other people or with the technology. Not specific on what the technology is, but how engaged they are, how excited they are about the technology, or do they want to learn quickly, or do they want to, work together with others? And I think the in-person, you see that way quicker. I think it's way quicker to learn that person, to see it, happen that way and grow really quickly. So I wouldn't necessarily focus on the technology bit. It's important, right? You'd still want to know what they're capable of, but I think, the engagement itself and how they get excited about it, especially early on, sets the stage for me.
Really appreciate that. Any other final thoughts here? Yes.
Thank you. This question is more like let's say like I'm the college student, I'm the university student. I've heard this project, I want to join, but I wouldn't have the much experience on the, let's say, like coding stuff. Let's say I'm freshman. Is there any support, like additional support on this side in order for the college student or university student to get onto this program?
It's an excellent question. Absolutely. I'm going to give Katie a shout out here. Katie, member of our PLDG team, also built PL's Launchpad curriculum. That is actually something we lean pretty heavily on. Most of our contributors aren't experts in every single programming language that touches the PL tech stack. So we actually do spend a fair amount of time with all of our contributors on education. Mostly self-guided, but what we look for in our recruiting process, and if you are interested, would love to have you apply to our next cohort, is a desire to learn, right? And that is something we can't always teach, but if that desire is there, we can certainly feed it. And so that's something we spend a lot of time working with our contributors on, and also really helping you find, exactly like we shared earlier, something that you're passionate about, right? We don't want to sit here and say, hey, we need you to contribute to this specific technology because we said so. That kind of goes against the spirit of open source. Spirit of open source is, I want to contribute to something because it means something to me and I'm excited about it. And that's really the driver. And so we simply want to enable that. right? But so much of that is actually, hey, I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me a little bit more clearly? That's something we spend a lot of time on. So great question, and absolutely.
Yeah, I would love to talk more on this. Thank you.
All right. We got one, folks. We got one. Progress. Well, I am at time here. Thank you all for taking the time to come out. We'll be hanging around. If anyone has questions, would love to chat. If anyone has feedback, would love to hear it as well. So thank you all for coming out, and enjoy your day.